Hi, I'm Mary Cross and welcome to the Building Bliss podcast. Today my guest is Teare Jones. She is a hormone and mindset coach, a fellow podcaster, a PMDD warrior, which I'm looking forward to diving in, and is now helping women in business find their true potential. Is that a fair synopsis of your...
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes.
it sounds like there's a lot packed in there.
Yeah. So how did you get to where you are now with all those strings to your bow?
Wow, I think it is that PMDD part of what you just said that is kind of the really big thing. So I was diagnosed with PMDD, Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, in 2018, and everything changed for me from there. So everything that I do now is basically because of that moment, I think. And to tell you what PMDD is, so it's a cyclical hormone-based mood disorder. So for most people, you're probably familiar with the term PMS.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of feeling in the build up to your period where you just feel a bit naggy and a bit like everyone's doing your head in.
Yeah.
And you know, there's that kind of stereotypical thing where it's like, oh, you just want to eat chocolate and watch like sad films. PMDD is almost like the big ugly sister of that. So it's very serious. It's extremely debilitating. It comes with psychological symptoms, emotional symptoms, physical symptoms, and those symptoms are present for 2 weeks of every month as opposed to a couple of days before your period. And for a long time I thought maybe I had like bipolar disorder because the symptoms would come and then they would go again. I never realised it was something that was linked to my menstrual cycle at all. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because of a lack of awareness. So PMDD affects 1 in 20, but because it's a hormone disorder, so it's, you know, it's linked to periods and it's also linked to mental health. They're two subjects which are still really taboo. So people don't talk about it. And I think also when it comes to your periods and the menstrual cycle, people don't really know what the normal is. And so for a long time I thought I was being over dramatic and attention seeking. And when my symptoms would go again, when my period came, I would think, oh, maybe it's just because I've started eating healthily again, and maybe I wasn't feeling very good because I wasn't walking enough, and you know, which I can laugh about now, but actually it's awful, the kind of that self deprecation and that kind of self-gaslighting really of, oh, I'm not looking after myself well enough, I just need to be better, I just need to do more. And so when I learned about PMDD, and the whole reason I found out about it was because I saw a post about it on Instagram. You know, it wasn't a doctor that made the link or anything like that. But I remember that moment and just thinking, it's not my fault. Like, how I've been feeling isn't my fault. What I've gone through isn't my fault. And I had to do a lot of learning and unlearning about myself, the menstrual cycle, mental health, to start to understand actually what PMDD really meant for me. And from there I had to do a lot of work on like self-compassion and just being kinder to myself, and it's trying to not let that kind of voice in my head that comes every couple of weeks, not let it win. And that's really, really difficult. But from there, and you know, we had lockdown, which was a great opportunity really, wasn't it, for self-development. And you know, I read every book under the sun in an attempt to like fix myself, I think. But from there I really learned that it wasn't just me feeling like that. And I'd been a weight loss coach for a few years at that point, and I loved being a weight loss coach, but I think I was getting bored of the conversation about weight.
Yeah.
And it was something that didn't really feel aligned, because when you talk about losing weight and you talk about self-compassion, they don't really go,
do they?
no.
Yeah.
And so I think I was getting quite bored of the conversation about weight loss, and seeing people just being really hard on themselves just didn't sit well with me. And then I was made redundant, and it was like, oh shit, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
It was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? But the obvious thing was, well, you've got a podcast about hormones and health. You're so passionate about women's health. You've got training and skills in coaching. It's obvious. You just need to put them both together. And that's kind of how I got into supporting other people with their hormones, their mindset, and now their businesses as well.
Yeah. That sounds like a really fantastic journey.
Yeah, I think
although dark points along the way to get to the other side.
A purposeful journey.
Yeah. So with all that in mind then, can you pinpoint one moment in that you consider to be your bravest?
Do you know, I find this question so hard, and I've listened to all the other guests on this podcast answering this question.
Yeah.
Because this is the one question that I'm like, I don't know. And there's so many points, like, you know, where I went self-employed and feeling like I have to just try this. That was a massive thing for me. But I'll be totally honest, I struggled that much with the question of me being brave that I actually put a post out on Instagram, on my Instagram stories about this.
Yeah.
And I just asked the question, what does bravery mean to you? Can you share some examples of times you've been brave? Just to get my inspiration flowing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who follow me on Instagram are people living with PMDD or what I call hormone havoc. So not necessarily PMDD, but the hormones just give them jip every month.
Yes.
And so a lot of the responses that I got on my poll last night were about their PMDD. And so I guess to answer the bravery question, it's not just my bravery story, but I guess the bravery story of people living with PMDD. And one person said, just, you know, having to divulge that information at work and tell my manager, and also telling my family about it. And those are really, really good points, because I think, again, it's such a taboo thing, mental health, menstrual health. People don't want to talk about these things, particularly at work.
Yeah, it's just like, especially if you've got
no
a male
thanks.
manager.
Yeah.
Not all men, well, hashtag.
Yeah.
But it is probably the last bastion of things that people aren't comfortable talking about, I think.
That's it. And I think, you know, there's been so much progress, and, you know, you only have to look at like the menopause space, which is like so different now, isn't it? And like, you know, the rhetoric's changing, the narrative's changing, and that's great. But I think when it comes to you as an individual having to disclose and be vulnerable, that's really difficult to do. But I guess the brave thing for me, for a person with PMDD, every month you are basically stripped of your personality, you're stripped of your character, you're stripped of your fun, you lose your voice. And I describe it as like you're behind like a smoke screen, and you can see the way you're behaving, you can see your thoughts, and you can see what you're saying. You can't really stop it, even though you're like, this is a terrible idea, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And for me, the feelings are very much like hopelessness, like what is the point in anything? Now that is not my personality. Like, no. I love life, I'm quite a positive person, I'm a very positive person. But when PMDD hits, it can just zap you of any hope, any energy, any zest for life. And I think the bravery part there is because despite all that, you carry on anyway.
Yeah.
And you continue to function, and you continue to do the things that are expected of you, you know, like going to work and being a parent. You still show up and do all those things, but taking it even deeper, like you choose to stay alive. And I just think that is brave. That is so brave when your mind is telling you not to, when your mind is telling you to just put the cover over yourself and never leave the room again. You do. You get up, you get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you go to work. And I think that is so brave, and I guess that is the bravery story of a person living with PMDD, that they carry on because that's what's expected of them.
Yeah, and that really is a daily fight, isn't it? And as you say, trying to fight your own mind like that is really difficult. I mean, I wouldn't say I've got PMDD, but I certainly suffer from those kind of thoughts when at those times of the month, and you're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What is the point? And then even though you probably know that that's what it is, there's a disconnect in sort of rationality, isn't there? Of you could tell yourself, well, I think it's this, but there's still something. It is a chemical imbalance, I guess.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that's the thing about PMDD that people don't realise. So it's all to do with the brain. So people think that PMDD is, you just said the word imbalance, people think that it's about hormones not doing what they should do, or they're imbalanced in some way, and actually the issue is in the brain. So my hormones are actually fine. I've got a typical menstrual cycle, there's no issues there, but it's the way that my brain responds to those fluctuating hormones in the body. That's what causes the symptoms, and it's all to do with the serotonin and how your brain absorbs it. And it's so fascinating, really, because there's a lot of links as well with PMDD to autism and ADHD, because I think it's a similar part of the brain. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. But actually, my menstrual cycle isn't the issue here. It's my brain.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about that, because I've seen a lot that people who are neurodivergent particularly suffer with it.
Yeah.
So it's more of the brain chemicals, as you say, that are causing the issues.
Yeah. Which I mean, doesn't really make it any better, but doesn't make it any worse. It's just, oh, great, okay, it's my brain that's the problem.
Yeah. So how do you go about tackling it? Is there anything you can do to ease the symptoms?
Yeah, so there's no cure for PMDD. The kind of last line treatment, if you like, is surgery, which is a bilateral oophorectomy, so the removal of your ovaries, which would stop you from having a cycle,
right,
effectively putting you into menopause. So that's the last line treatment. But prior to that, there's things like chemical menopause, which is like a temporary medication that you can take. And there's the other side of the scale, which is, you know, your lifestyle changes. So, you know, I said before about I beat myself up for not walking enough and things like that, but we all know, don't we, that getting out in the fresh air is really good for us. So there's things like that can help. Something that's really helped me is SSRIs, so antidepressants, and for a person in PMDD, they're taken just in the luteal phase only.
I was going to say you only take them in
that's right. The time, yeah, so, you know, it's different from a person maybe who has depression taking them every single day. So that's something that's been really helpful for me, a bit of a game changer for me for my treatment pathway, really, because I think putting in that as a foundation, the medication as a foundation, has meant that the self-care has been easier to embrace.
Yeah.
You know, I don't tend to have those moments as much where I'm like, well, what's the point? What is the point in doing that? There's no point. I'm not gonna bother showing up for myself today, because the medication is almost like a stepping stone and gets me to that point where I can do those things. Then
it becomes an upward cycle, doesn't it?
Because
I think I know that when I've been in my darkest moments, like trying to meditate or journal, I can't even take that first step to do that. So I really feel for people, because you've got a world of noise going, well, just do this, just journal, just have you tried thinking positively?
Yes, I think there's so much onus now on that kind of responsibility of the individual, and we've all got a responsibility to take care of ourselves, of course, but I think the danger of that is we then blame ourselves when we need support, or we think we're weak for needing support, or, you know, medical intervention, and that's just not true at all. If you're living with something like PMDD, which is a very real, very valid health condition, that's the whole point. It's a diagnosis, which means you probably need some sort of support with it.
And I think there's probably a lack of understanding in the medical community. I know from sort of the menopause side of things that most doctors only get, I think, 2 hours training on the menopause, and I'm guessing it's not much more for menstrual health either.
No, absolutely. And you know, my biggest advice for anyone who's listening to this and maybe is thinking, oh, you know, I want to speak to my doctor about this, is track your cycle first of all, so that there's a pattern that you can identify, but also take along, you know, the nice guidelines for the treatments of these conditions, because it's things like that that can help your doctor to help you. You know, they're not the enemy, but you do need to help them to help you.
Yeah, you just got to advocate for yourself, basically, haven't you? Which isn't easy when you're feeling like that.
Yeah.
Because I guess before you had perhaps the medication, do you have like an impending sense of dread, thinking, oh, right, well, my good 2 weeks is nearly up. It must be really hard to live knowing that that's around the corner, month after month.
Yeah, so in particular, a time that was really difficult for me was when we were trying to conceive my daughter, because I would have 2 weeks of PMDD, and then the symptoms would go as my period arrived, and in place of PMDD symptoms was the disappointment of not conceiving. So that was a few days, if you like. And then when you're living with PMDD, you have trauma from those intrusive thoughts and the suicidal ideation. So you have to kind of put yourself back together again, and then before you know it, you kind of like, oh, I'm ovulating next week, so my symptoms are going to be back. And it's that impending doom of just like, this is me on my best day, and yet I'm still feeling anxious about what's to come, and I'm still feeling traumatized about last month. So getting to that point where you're just kind of like, I'm just, you know, it's something that affects people for around 2 weeks of every month, but actually it's not. It's something that affects you every single day.
All the time, yeah. And how was that then growing up? Like, did it affect your relationships, friendships, and did you struggle?
Yeah, so I remember, like, at the age of 14, so, you know, I mean, it's a hard time anyway, isn't it, being a teenager?
Yeah.
Like, it's not fun. But yeah, I remember, like, when I was, like, 14, just, like, walking, and it was kind of, like, down the river where we live, and I just remember thinking, like, what would happen if I just walked into the water? Like, who cares? I'll just do it. And I didn't. But I just remember just knowing that I was just different, and none of my friends were probably doing similar things, you know, a few meters down the riverway. That wasn't a thing that was happening. And so it was really easy to just compare myself to my friends who were, you know, very similar to me. You know, we'd grown up together. They had similar background to me, similar, obviously, education, similar lifestyle. Yet for some reason I was being so dramatic and hating myself. And so it was just one of those things where I felt really ashamed of how I was feeling, and ashamed of myself, because, you know, my friends were really happy and I wasn't. Yeah. And I felt guilty about that.
Yeah, and isolated.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm guessing, I don't know your age, but I'm guessing this is pre-social media at least, so in terms of being able to... Just about. But in terms of, like, I'm just thinking of now, like, the awareness that's out there, it's a lot easier. Whatever issue you're facing, you can find a tribe, can't you? You can find your people who are in the same boat and not feel quite as alone. But
oh, definitely. And that I would say that, because I found out about PMDD because of Instagram, and social media has such a bad rap, but at the same time, like, I can't fault it for that. And I remember when I created my Instagram account, which was for PMDD, but it was anonymous, and I didn't put my face on it or anything like that, because I wasn't quite ready to almost, like, get out of the PMDD closet, but I wanted to be involved in the conversations, and the support was incredible. And I've got friends from all over the world who I've never met in person, probably never will, but I know that I can text them on day 26 and just be like, I'm day 26 of my cycle, and they'll know what to say, they'll know what I'm going through. Yeah. And that's so powerful. So I will always be grateful for that. Yeah. To social media for that.
It really is, because I think you need that support, don't you? And finding people who really understand. Obviously, you know, your loved ones, your partners could see you going through it and could be understanding, but there's no understanding like someone who's actually going through it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it sounds like really I normally ask if you've got brave as you've got older, but it sounds like you've had to be brave all your life just to be here from the thoughts you were facing.
I think people have to be brave every day. And I think, I mean, when I picture the word bravery, what I picture is Simba from The Lion King. You know that scene when his dad dies and he's like, he has to be really brave. That's what I picture. But then I was like, bravery doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that big. Bravery is, you know, stepping out of your comfort zone. It could be something huge. It could be overcoming, like, adversity, but also it's something like putting yourself out there when you feel like you don't want to. It's showing up for yourself when you don't want to. All those things are brave, and that's things people do every single day, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think has been a theme, and it has been interesting to listen, because I guess I didn't know when I posed the question what people would say, and I guess probably in my mind I was thinking of some life-changing moment, but I think there has been a theme of it is sometimes it's just getting out of bed.
Yeah.
Takes bravery.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's a sliding scale, isn't it, as we go through life as well, because I think you said once you'd post-lockdown you'd started to say yes to things that you would have said no to before. Yes. Have you got any good examples of that?
I think, and you know, I think a lot of that is like setting up that Instagram account where I was anonymous, and then realising that if I wanted to raise awareness and, you know, smash the taboo, I had to have a face, because that was the whole point of being honest and putting yourself out there. So I think that's one moment where I was kind of like, yeah, I'm really glad I did that, because then I started my podcast, and I wouldn't have done my podcast if I hadn't have been, you know, on Instagram properly. And if I hadn't have started my podcast, which I had no clue how to do that, I was just like, I just want to talk with some other people who've got PMDD. And then that was like led me to being self-employed, and I remember thinking, I can't be self-employed, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do my taxes and all that kind of stuff. But actually all of those little moments were pushing that comfort zone a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think actually over the last couple of years with being self-employed and being a business owner, you really have to push that comfort zone, because you're not just showing up for yourself, you're showing up for your business. And when you're showing up for your business, that means money and your family. So there's a lot riding on it.
There's no safety net.
Exactly. So you have to do these things. And I talk a lot in the work that I do about imposter syndrome. And I think there's a huge thing, especially with entrepreneurs and especially with women who are just kind of like, oh, I know I need to do that, but I can't, or I don't know how, so I just don't take the action. And I've had to be really, I've really had to like call that out when that's me, and kind of be like, if I'm not doing that just because my mind tells me I can't, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
basically.
That's a red flag. Yeah. Doable. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm not doing it, because I've got self-doubt, then I'm doing it. And that's really uncomfortable. But I don't regret any of those decisions. It's only led to good things in the end. So that says a lot, doesn't it? That sometimes the self-doubt is just, that's all it is. It's just some self-doubt.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit like mixed messages, isn't it? Because I've been trying to say yes more to things that I wouldn't normally do, but then I'm also trying to put boundaries in place as a people pleaser of saying no to things that I don't want to do. But I guess maybe saying no to those things frees up the time to say yes to the other things.
You're saying yes to you, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which sometimes means saying yes to things, and sometimes it'll mean saying no, but ultimately it's saying yes to you and your boundaries and your worth. So
yeah.
I get that.
Moving on to laughter then, lightening the mood. So how important has laughter been getting through those dark times?
Do you know, I think laughter, and this sounds cheesy, but it's an antidote, isn't it? It really is. And I think laughter isn't to do with mood, it's more to do with like the things around you. It's an external thing, actually. And by that, what I mean is I could be in like the depths of despair and depths of PMDD, but then I see something funny or I hear something funny and I laugh, and I belly laugh, and it helps. And I think laughter is one of those things, it doesn't matter how bad you feel, it can just like almost like nudge you up a little bit. And there's times when, you know, I'm really struggling with my mood, and then my husband will send me like a reel or something of like a dog doing something stupid, or, you know, something that's so stupid, and I'm like, I don't want to watch that stupid reel, I'm not watching it because I'm in a mood. And then I watch it and I'm just like tears streaming down my face because of this daft dog's done on an Instagram reel, and it's so undeep. I don't know what the right word is for that, but it's so surface level, and and I think that's why it works. It just takes you from the depths, and it just brings you out. Because I don't know that dog. I've got no personal connection to it. I've got no personal connection to the reel, and I probably will forget about it in 2 minutes' time. But it's had the ability to just make me howl with laughter. So for me, little things like that, I just think so important.
Yeah, well, it's a change of mood, and I always say laughter's a reflex that you can't control as well, because I think we spend so much time in our heads thinking, but when something's funny, it's funny. And you can't, and probably the more you try and stop yourself, actually, the more you laugh.
Yes, yeah, and I think especially like, you know, if I'm in a mood and then my husband says something to make me laugh, I'm so annoyed with it. I'm so annoyed. But the more annoyed I get, the funnier it gets. And it really is an antidote. It really is.
Well, I'm very much like that because my daughter's got is autistic and has ADHD, and things can be really bad, and that's my route out of it has always been to make her laugh or say a stupid pun or whatever it is, because it just breaks that mood, doesn't it?
It's magic. It really is. And I think the world needs more of that, because we do take things really seriously, don't we? And I think sometimes, like, you know, again, me and my husband can be having a conversation, it feels so heavy, and life feels really heavy sometimes, doesn't it? And I just think if we can still laugh And like you say, if it's a reflex, we can't help it anyway. But if you can find something to laugh about, then it's just going to make that dark, deep thing you're going through just feel a little bit brighter.
Yeah.
Like, how could that ever be a bad thing?
It gives you a bit of even if it just gives you a bit of respite as well. It's not saying it's going to magically cure you or make you feel 100% better, but it's a rest, isn't it?
Definitely.
From the noises.
Yeah.
So do you use humour in your coaching with people, would you say?
When it feels safe to do that. So I know that some of the people that I work with, and also something that I have to really be mindful of, is where a person is in their cycle. So I could meet with them today and they're really upbeat and they're feeling good because they're day 3 of their cycle. They've got their period. Symptoms are in the past now. Happy days. And then in 2 weeks' time we meet again and they've just ovulated. So their symptoms are probably there and they're probably intense. So I have to be very mindful of that, actually. So it's always very much guided by them. But I actually work with somebody who is a comedian, and she brings PMDD into her stand-up, and she's amazing. She's so funny. And so I know that her and I can have that back and forth. And to lighten the mood, because she can do that. Whereas there's some clients that I work with that I just know, for them, they're not quite at that stage yet. And I guess part of my coaching is getting them to a point where it doesn't feel so heavy and where they can laugh about it. I've never really thought about it like that, actually. But I think when people first come to me, they can feel very vulnerable. Maybe they've just learned about PMDD, or they're coming to me because they're struggling. They're having problems with hormones in whatever way that looks like for them. And the whole goal is to get them to a place where it doesn't feel so heavy for them. And whether that means that, we have conversations about them getting medical treatment, whether we have conversations about them looking after themselves better, or, putting in boundaries. Actually, the whole thing really is getting them to a place where they can still live the life that they want on their terms, in spite of the hormone havoc that they've got. And humour's a really great way to do that, isn't it? So,
well, it's great to hear there's a comedian doing it, because I think I talk about the things that have been challenging to my mental health in my comedy, and it takes the power back, and then it empowers other people as well. So for example, if she did a gig to your community, they would find it so healing, and that everybody, like, and cathartic, that everybody feels the same way.
That's it. And I think for her, that's what it's all about. It's raising awareness, but it's also, there's always going to be people in her audience actually who can relate to what she's saying. So it's an important job that she's doing, really, and she's doing it through humour, and that's great, isn't it?
And she's very brave to do that, because she'll face a lot of opposition of male comedians, and like, another woman talking about periods.
Exactly. In fact, I'm sure that's one of her jokes, you know. I'm sure she even uses that, so
So, have you got a favourite joke you want to share with us?
Okay, I hope you're ready for this.
Okay.
I hope I deliver it right. A drum and 2 cymbals fall off a cliff. Badumch. There you go.
I like that. That's good.
My husband gave me that. He's a drummer. So he gave me that one.
I'm a big Chandler fan from Friends, so I often go a boom after my jokes. So when my son got a drum kit, I was like, could you start coming to my gigs? And then every time I tell a joke, just do it a boom, so people know that's the punchline.
Well, he told me that joke last night, and like, it was one of those things that every time I remembered it, I kept laughing. So I was like, that's the one.
I love that. Most people's jokes have been like this kind of silly, like dad jokes, I guess. So
I love a good dad joke.
It's brilliant. Inspiration, then. I think this is going to be a doozy from you. So we'll start with, what's been your inspiration?
What has been my inspiration? Well, what has been my inspiration, I can categorically say it's my diagnosis of PMDD, because I think actually it's given me purpose. And when I think about PMDD and what it means to me, I do think about that 14-year-old girl walking on her own, and I can even picture, like, it was a really overcast, cloudy day, it was really dark, and I think the inspiration for me is making sure, or working towards, no one else feeling like that. because of their hormones, because it's something that if I'd have known at the time that's what I was going through and there was a name for it and it wasn't my fault, everything would have been different. And it took me until the age of 28 to get diagnosed.
I was going to say, what's the time? So for 14 years basically in the wilderness.
That's it. So it makes no sense why that happened. Like there's no reason for that to happen. And so that for me is giving my condition a purpose, is my inspiration. And I think a lot of people do say, you know, your condition doesn't have to define you, and it doesn't. And if that's, you know, if that's your mindset, that's absolutely fine, and you know, you do what works for you. For me, I have to take something so awful and make it better. I have to have a reason for it to happen, because otherwise what I do is I go, I've got this condition and I'm a victim, and I don't want to feel like that. And so I have to use it. It has to be purposeful for me. It has to make things better for somebody else. And if it does, I can kind of understand why I've got it. So I guess that is the what is the inspiration. PMDD actually is the inspiration. And I never thought I'd say that. And I know that there might be people who listen to this and go, PMDD, but I hate PMDD and I'd never ask for it. And I absolutely wouldn't. But I'm glad that I've been able to use it to help other people and as a catalyst for, you know, my business. And it has had its advantages. Even just saying that word doesn't feel right, because I would never usually say that, but actually I've learned to live more cyclically. So I know that in every stage of my menstrual cycle now, there are strengths and then there are watch outs, and particularly obviously in the later part of my cycle, that's a really tricky time. But I also know that when I'm near the start of my cycle, like there's no stopping me, and that's something to really be celebrated. And if it wasn't for having PMDD, I wouldn't be able to really optimize those better days, because I wouldn't have the knowledge of them. So in that sense, PMDD is the inspiration.
And well, there is a lot of sort of coming now research about that, about, you know, you've got a creative phase and, you know, using that, and then there is a phase that you need to be more nurturing, and we do need to rest, don't we? And absolutely. I think especially as busy women, we tend to just go
Definitely.
and stop listening to our bodies and become disconnected, and think certainly with modern life that's what we've done, whereas perhaps in the old days everyone had to follow that cycle, didn't they?
That's right. And I think I always say when people are trying to understand their menstrual cycle, like think of yourself like a squirrel, because in the winter a squirrel will hibernate, they'll go inwards, they'll just like, they won't want to do anything, they won't want to see anybody. And then in springtime they start thinking like, oh, maybe actually I can come out of hibernation now, maybe I'll start getting myself out there again. And that's very much how I feel when my period's just coming to an end. I'm kind of like, oh, actually I feel quite good. And then that peaks, and then I start thinking, right, it's time to go back into hibernation mode now. And that will be the time where I start almost like nesting again. And you know, in a typical person who doesn't have PMDD, that in itself is a really wonderful time, because like you say, it's a very nurturing time. It's when my creativity peaks during my difficult days actually. But the strength of that, you know, as a business owner, is during those days of my cycle when I know that that's really difficult for me, and it wouldn't be good for me to have clients or go on podcasts or anything like that, especially as well clients with PMDD. We wouldn't want, you know, we have to be mindful of triggering each other. But I can use those days actually when I'm feeling more creative to do things like my marketing and my social media and updating my website, so I can still be very, very purposeful in that time. And if that means that I'm sat in bed on my laptop and I've got like the TV on in the background and I'm not like the epiphany of productivity and efficiency, that's okay. Absolutely fine. I'm doing what feels good for me in that phase of my cycle. Which
is the joy obviously of you becoming self-employed, because you can choose to do that. Because it must be really tough to feel like that and have to clock in and out every day.
Definitely. I mean, I wrote a blog on this recently, that, you know, you go to work and then you come home again, and then you go to work, you come home again. But for me, I couldn't stay in a job that expected me to show up the same way every single day, when I know that I can't do that. My energy doesn't allow it. So for me, I used to work in corporate finance. To be consistent every single day didn't work for me. And that's not to say that, you know, because I have a menstrual cycle, I have a weakness. Actually, my strengths and my watch outs are just different at different times of the month. But obviously, if I'd have said that to my employer, and, you know, there's going to be some days when I, you know, just need to kind of not see clients and things like that, they probably wouldn't have been able to accommodate that. So it's really tricky. And what I always say is, if you can think of like cyclical living as an approach as opposed to something you have to go all in with, then just having that approach and being mindful of where you are in your cycle and what you might find trickier and what help you might need, that in itself is going to be really empowering.
So that brings us nicely on to how you want to inspire others, because it sounds like you've already done that to a great degree with your podcast and the community that you've gathered around you.
I think I just want everyone to know that whatever they're living with, because nobody really has perfect health, not forever, not in today's world. And I just want people to know that you can still live life on your terms with a condition like PMDD or with hormone havoc. You can still live life on your terms, not just in spite of these things, but they can help you to do that. And I think this is where my business mentoring has come in recently, because people say to me, I'd love to be self-employed, but I can't because I have bipolar disorder or I have fibromyalgia. And I'm kind of like, but you can. And so that is how I've kind of gone into business mentoring, because a lot of my clients are then going, well, I want to be self-employed. And so we've kind of gone down that route, and people have started coming to me now saying, well, actually, I have PMDD and I'm a business owner. So it's this very kind of small niche that I seem to be working with accidentally. But it's brilliant. And it's not to say you have to be self-employed if you have PMDD. It's about saying what's going to be the best thing for you. And if that's self-employment, brilliant. If it's the consistency of a job where you go to work, you get paid the same every month, you work the same hours, you know where you stand, brilliant. You know, it's really living life on your terms, not on the terms of what you think you should be doing. Yeah. And letting people know that they do have those choices. I think I always thought that I had to work in corporate and do 9 to 5, and I had to like climb some ladder that I don't even know what that means. And it was only when I realised that I don't have to do it that was so freeing. And it was like, oh, I can actually do work on my terms. That was a huge moment for me. So making sure other people know that's the message I want to go across.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I think that's what's missing, is knowing we've got choices, especially as women, and especially as women entrepreneurs or starting a business. It's funny because I had a meeting with my financial advisor last week about, you know, annual review, and I was like, I consider myself a very risk averse person. He was like, what? He said, you've set up your own business, you set up another business, you're doing the podcast. I was like, oh, never really thought of it like that. And I think it's just people, if they meet other people who've got a different way of doing things, that is an inspiration, isn't it, that you don't have to go the traditional route.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%.
Spark then. Okay. Now I think I've realised from doing the podcast there's quite a degree of crossover between inspiration and spark, but I guess I'll start by asking, what does spark mean to you in terms of being different from inspiration?
I think when I think of inspiration, I actually think of our experiences or the people around us. I think it's an external thing. I think a spark is an internal fire in your belly moment. It's ooh, I want to do that. Something that a client said to me recently is really stuck, and she just kind of said it as a passing comment. She was like, I guess you just can't get away from what sets your soul on fire. And I was like, oh wow, I love that comment. But it's true, it's internal. I think a spark is something that happens within you and you can almost feel it. It's that feeling of, I can't let this go. Like, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm excited about it. And that's all I need to know. That for me is what a spark is. And that's all you need, is a spark. And then anything else that happens will come from that. You just need that initial spark, which is an internal thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good description of it. Yeah, because I think it's that thing of, I have to do this. There is no other option. It's something that drives you on. And then that's when the good stuff comes in, because it's so internally driven, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do you find your spark, or what gave you your initial spark? I guess your diagnosis, but then following on from that, the little sparks along the way.
I think what gave me the sparks actually is the inspiration, so the people. And I have friends who I would say are the inspirations for me. And I think it's the people that you surround yourself with. And I think particularly as a female entrepreneur, I remember going to networking events and it was all very stuffy, very corporate. And if it's a room that's predominantly full of people who don't have periods, as soon as you say what you do, they kind of go, okay, and move on. They're not interested. And that's absolutely fine. But I just remember feeling like, oh, I don't have a place here. But when you do find that place, when you do find, your people, they are the people who you see who also inspire you, who they're doing amazing, incredible things. But then when you speak to them, you realise they're not actually that different from you. They're just a person who's trying their best as well. And that's what it comes down to on a very human level, is as amazing as a person is, they're still a human first. They're still just, but they're nothing special. They're no more special than you are. They're no more deserving than you are. So if they can do it, you can too. And I think that's been a massive thing for me, is surrounding myself with other people who are not too dissimilar from me, who are doing well in spite of adversity, or who are, using their experiences for good. They are the people who have really lit a spark in me. And I remember when I first went self-employed and I'd just been made redundant, and I was kind of like, can I really go self-employed? Are people actually going to pay me money? I'd worked for this massive global brand and I could hide behind that before. But to actually step out and be me, I was kind of like, can I not? And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, June, and she is somebody who, again, she's not that different from me. She had experiences with her hormones. She didn't have a great time with her menopause. And she's now set up a business, Menopause 360, which is all about supporting people to have more understanding of menopause at work, because that's the experience that she had that was really difficult. And I remember speaking with her and seeing she was just at the start of her business at the time, and she was just starting a PhD, and she was just kind of like, Laura, like, the obvious thing for you to do here is to do this. Like, how can you not do it? And I just remember seeing the success that she was having, and her being such a champion for me and a role model, that I was kind of like, yeah, it almost like it would be, it's not like a good idea, it's like the best idea to do this. Like, how can I not try it? And I knew that if I didn't try it then, like, I never would. But it's because I had conversations like that with June and other people that it just made me kind of go, it's not that crazy of an idea. Like, it's not like I'm saying I'm going to go and work from the moon every day.
No.
It's literally, I'm just going to work for myself. It's not that wild. It's not that wild to believe that I can do it. So it's the conversations with other people and them sharing their experiences that I think is just, that's what causes the spark.
Well, I shared a quote yesterday that said, when you spend your time with people who see the possibilities in everything, you start to believe that everything is possible.
Yes.
And I think that's that in a nutshell, really, because you all rise together, don't you? Because you're like, well, they're doing it. You can't be what you can't see. And seeing those people do well obviously gives you your spark, but then you'll be somebody else's spark now, and that's what you're guiding people on their journey, aren't you?
You know what, I think that is true, that I think you never know what kind of spark you're being for somebody else, and the inspiration you're causing just by being. And you might not be trying to be like, I'm not trying to be an inspiration, I'm not trying that, and it makes me feel a bit ugh when people say you're like, oh, you're inspiring. I'm like, don't say that.
But that's just because we're not very good at taking compliments though, isn't it, as well? So.
But actually it kind of makes you feel like, oh, so it is worth me doing this, it is worth me sharing that, because, you know, business aside, if people can see that, you know what, she's got PMDD and she's just not kind of rolled over and took it, she's like, she's not a victim, she's really still like going for it and doing what she can, maybe I can too. And that's all I want, is for people to know that they've got those choices. So yeah. And
you want them to get shit done,
I
which
want
is
them to get shit done.
your networking group and your program. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Because we love the name. Because I should say that me and Laura met at a business fair. I think we were already following each other on Instagram, and she came up and she went, oh, you're the well-being without wankiness. Yeah, it's really lodged in my mind. She said, because I've got a sweary thing as well. And I was like, yeah, you see, like-minded. So yeah, tell us a bit about that.
People remember swear words. Yeah. So Get Shit Done Club is a co-working and networking group, and it actually started in April 2023, so it's not quite a year old yet. But it was a fundraising event. That's all it was. It was a one-off fundraising event where I wanted to raise some money for the International Association for Premenstrual Disorders, the IAPMD, because they are the only global non-profit for people living with premenstrual disorders. They're an incredible resource. I would encourage everyone to go to their website if they're just hearing about PMDD for the first time today. It's where I refer all my clients to for information and support, and it's everything. And I, for a while, did some work with them. So I was their social media manager and I edited their podcast for a while. And when my coaching took off, I had to leave that behind. So just before I left, I was like, do you know what? April's PMDD Awareness Month. I want to raise some money for the organisation. So I don't have an office where I can do a bake sale. And I was kind of like, what can I do that's not going to take all of my time and resources? So I thought, I know, I'll just put on this event and I'll invite my entrepreneurial friends to come along. I'll give them a presentation about PMDD. So they've got that education and that awareness, and we can raise some money for the organisation. Happy days. And I'd never done anything like that before, so I didn't really know how it was going to go. But we did it in Chester, and people who I didn't know came, and that for me was like, oh, okay, people have invested in this. It's not that they were just coming to support me. And so there were all these people coming, and at the end they were like, so do you do this every month then? This isn't the first one, is it? And, you know, when's the next one? And so we've done one every month since, and we have a different speaker every time. But the whole thing is, my vision for it really is, when you come to Get Shit Done Club, you meet people who are like you. So you get that inspiration and that spark. You learn something new. So we'll have a guest speaker talk about, you know, their area of expertise, or just share something useful. And then you can co-work if you want to. And I used to be a proper like head teacher about this and be like, co-working time, everybody. And now I'm just like, if you want to co-work, brilliant. But if you're here to network and that's the thing that you want to focus on today, great, that's fine. But it's those three things that we offer. So it's learning something new, it's the connecting with new people, and it's the co-working. And you take as much from that as you like. We have some months where we have a brand photographer come and do like mini photo shoots if you don't want to have a big professional photo shoot. So you'll always get a lot from the event, because, you know, I've been to so many networking events where I think, well, that was really good, or it was really useful, but I could have been doing something else at home. And I think you're always feeling like I should be doing something else. So by, you know, trying to get as much out of that morning as you can, then I think it's, you know, gives us a bit more of an advantage, doesn't it, when we're, you know, when we get home then and we think, oh, right now I've got these emails to answer to and things.
You want it to be worth your time, don't you?
So I've been doing that every month since. In
did
Chester.
A full day, did you, for International Women's Day as well?
Yeah, so we did. Oh, it was amazing. So we had a huge event on International Women's Day, and it was something that I did with a friend of mine, Liz. And what I say about Liz is, like, never just go for a coffee with her, because you go for a coffee with Liz and you end up planning this huge event for International Women's Day. And it was amazing. It was the biggest event I've ever done. I think it was the biggest event Liz has ever done as well. And it was just women supporting women. and it was learning to look after your well-being whilst being somebody who is, you know, a working woman, who is a career person, who is an entrepreneur. So it wasn't just for business owners, it was for anyone who is finding that balance of work and well-being a struggle. It was fantastic. It was brilliant. I loved it. I want to do it again, like now.
Yeah.
But we said we'll wait until next year.
Yeah.
But through doing my own networking events, what that has meant is that I've had a lot of people in business come to me saying, I really want to work with you from like a mindset perspective. And they're kind of saying, do you know what, my hormones aren't the issue, but I'm struggling with getting shit done. I'm struggling with procrastination. And so at the start of this year, I launched a program which is aptly named the Get Shit Done program.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, to work more one-to-one with me and to work on your mindset around your business, but also the more pragmatic things, like, you know, the actual getting shit done.
Yeah,
and I'm
like time management and things like that. Yeah.
And I'm somebody who's a bit like I'm a bit like a dog with a bone. So if you tell me you're going to do something, I expect you to do it. So
that's the head teacher mode kicking in again.
So I can be, I think, you know, the self-compassionate part of me is very gentle and very kind of, you know, we don't beat you up if you don't do this, but equally, what's going to make it easier for you to make it happen? So it's that kind of delicate balance of being really compassionate, but also being accountable, because I think we all need that. And I remember when I first set out thinking, I just want someone to hold my hand, or like, you know, hold the mouse while I press the button on that email or launch my website, because you're so terrified of doing something wrong. I don't know what you think is going to happen if something goes wrong.
The world's going to implode if you've got a spelling mistake on your website.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm sure my website does have lots of spelling mistakes. But actually, the world won't end. And I think when you're starting out and you're so far out of your comfort zone, you need somebody to champion you and be that cheerleader. So I guess that's kind of what I do with the Get Shit Done program, is just keep nudging them along.
Truth with love, that's what I like to say.
Truth with love.
Truth with love.
Yes, that's it.
That's what you need. Sometimes you do need someone to give your head a wobble.
Yes, exactly.
But in the nicest possible way.
Yes, yeah.
So moving on to success then, what does success look like for you now, and has that changed as you've got older?
Success for me is the simple life. And although that definition hasn't changed, my vision of simple life has. So I used to think that success was you go to work, it's drama free. You get paid and you make the most of the days when you're not at work, and you make the most of the days when you're not in PMDD. And that for me was the simple life. I didn't need anything bigger. I don't need anything, you know, I don't need a ton of money. I don't need a really nice car. Those things didn't really appeal to me, and they still don't really appeal to me. But the simple life for me was very much just the small things, you know, my family and my friends and time, spending my time well. But then what I realised, and this is where the vision has changed, is I wasn't really living true to that, because I didn't really like my job in corporate. And I remember just being like, I literally go to work and count down the hours to the end of the day, as you know, as many people do. And I think, again, for some people they like that because it's the consistency and that's what they need. But for me, I remember the highlight of my working week was on a Thursday we got to play a game, and the game was like bowling or darts or something in the office, and basically if you won, our employer would pay for your breakfast the next day. And that was like the highlight of our working week. It was like, oh, you're playing darts today, and if you won or like you scored whatever number, you got your breakfast the next day, and that was like the pinnacle. And I think I remember one day just being like, this can't continue. And I was good at the job, and I know that my boss really liked me, but I was just like, I'm not thriving here.
Not lighting me up.
No, not at all. It did not set my soul on fire. No. And yeah, I think that for me was when I realised that the simple life, as much as it was still, I wanted drama free. That's always been the thing. Don't want drama. PMDD causes enough of that. But actually, I can have excitement, and I can have variety. And actually, for me, I don't thrive off consistency, whereas some people do. I love that I can look in my diary and be like, oh right, I'm recording a podcast today on the Wirral, and you know, and then I've got this meeting with a person who I've never met before, and I love that. Whereas I know that, you know, my husband, he's total opposite. He works a job which is very secure. It's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It's salaried, and for him that is what makes him thrive, because it's the security and it's the consistency. Whereas for me, I just love the variety and the excitement. And that is really the success for me. Is it's still very much the simple life, but knowing that I don't need to settle.
Yeah.
And it's the simple life, not the complacent life.
Yeah.
I guess is the thing. Yeah.
The simple life that you create for yourself.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Thank you.
So our final question, we ask what your younger self would say if they could see you now. And I'm going to be very specific with you, because I'm going to ask you what 14-year-old you stood by the river would say if they could see you now.
That makes me feel like I want to cry.
We have tissues.
I don't think she would even understand, like, I don't think she could even comprehend that she is now somebody who actually okay with her, and she wouldn't understand that actually that she got to that point, because I honestly think when I was 14 I didn't know how long I'd make it for. So just the fact that she could see me or her alive, happy, with a daughter and a husband, but also self-employed, not in, you know, I thought I had to be a hairdresser when I was little because that's what everyone told me. Which is a terrible idea, can I just say? Awful idea, to be terrible at that job. But I think her just seeing that life didn't pan out as she thought it would, and to some degree as she was told it would. You know, she was told a lot of things, like, you'll probably do this and then you'll do that. You know, you'll finish school, you'll go to college, you'll go to university. And I did do all those things, but I think she very much thought that life was set. And I think if she could see how different things had turned out, I don't think she'd believe it. No. I honestly think she'd be like, well, that's somebody else.
Yeah.
Give me the wrong person. So yeah, I don't know what she would say. I think she'd just say, like, you're having a laugh. Like, it can't be me. But I think she would, hopefully she would learn that compassion sooner than wait until she was 28.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. That's
you.
Great. So where can everyone find you then if they want to find out more about Get Shit Done or PMDD?
So they can find me on social media as Laura Teare Jones. That's an easy one. Or on my website, which is lauratearjones.com.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being such a brilliant guest. That was really informative for me. And yeah, I think it's another one of those reality checks, is that you've got no idea what someone else is going through at any point in their life or in their day even. So yeah, I think that was really interesting to listen to. So thanks for being a guest.
Oh, thank you very much.